and wanton fury of the man who set the savage tempo of the jazz era, who went from nowhere to the top of the world and back again without missing a beat. This is the story of glittering days and smoke blue nights, throbbing with all the sins and sensations of a life that could happen only to a man named Gene Krupa. He had them all: drums, dreams, love. He found hearts easier to break than habits, pounding his pulsing beat into the hearts of all America, battling his habits, his hells, himself through the blaring world of jazz. There were many women he loved along the way, and one who loved him all the way.
You hear that, Papa? You boys caught the train again.
Go, Gene, go!
Hey guys, welcome to this brand new video series I'm doing where we are going to be looking at, today we're looking at the Gene Krupa Story, which is sort of a debated film, if you will, and I'm joined today by the Gene Krupa expert, Mr. Brooks Tegler. Brooks, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bert. I'm always glad to be here.
So today's topic of discussion is the film The Gene Krupa Story, starring Sal Mineo from 1959. I'm going to say right up front that you look at the comments of this film on YouTube, and there are people, rightfully so, who absolutely love it. It is their childhood. It is the reason they play drums. Right. It's like Whiplash nowadays or something like that. Of course, it draws people to the drums, right? Is that fair to say?
I think that's quite fair to say, and I think there are things about the film that would definitely be highly laudable. First and foremost, of course, would be the fact that Gene plays on the soundtrack, and that Gene was somewhat involved in helping Sal Mineo become Gene. After that, that's about the time that I turn and walk away.
Yeah. Well, all right. So that being said, what we're doing here with Brooks is looking at it from a really analytical, what's wrong with this film? But I love certain movies where I'm sure historically they're just like terrible and they're not correct at all, but still cool movies. Now, I did watch this recently from a perspective of watching this in 2022. It's pretty boring. It's like an hour and 50 minutes or something like that. It's a lot, and it's kind of drags on, and it really doesn't make Gene look, it's got cool drum solos, but it paints Gene in kind of a negative light. Absolutely.
So much more than kind of. And he wound up paying that price for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
This thing came out in 59, and Gene passed away in 73. But this thing dogged his tail till the very end. And even after he was gone, the number of people who were convinced that Gene was a drug addict is alarmingly high. And a lot of it comes from seeing this movie.
Yeah.
It's just something that so many people love to believe stuff like that they won't let it go even when it's proven to be wrong.
No. So the clips we're going to go through are kind of in chronological order in the film, and we will get to the point where he gets arrested for drugs. And as you see behind Brooks right now, he's got actual props from the movie, which are newspapers.
Yeah, and I have to mention that these came from the man who was the primary drum coach for Sal Mineo. There were others who claimed to help coach him, maybe so, I don't know. Gene, of course, did a lot, but a man named Jim Fernandez was the guy who would have the chart, the recording, and a working script of the film, which I also have. And Jim Jr. sent all this stuff to me. And these were props that were used in the filming. Cool. So Jim Jr. was really nice in sending me all this stuff.
Absolutely. And, for you, love it or hate it, it's Gene Krupa history. And just the fact, that's a movie prop. That's like awesome. Everyone likes movie props. Now, before we start, you've mentioned to me as well that the film in the foreign market was called Drum Crazy.
Right.
Which lightens the load a little bit of all this is the Gene Krupa story. It makes it a little less, it digs less at Gene Krupa as a person with that title, with the different title.
I sort of made it a passing rule that if someone wanted to talk to me about the film and they were calling it Drum Crazy, I could talk to him about it. The Gene Krupa Story, I had nothing to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll break that rule today so we can talk about it, and then we'll continue on. But we're going to start early on in the film. Do you want to set up this first clip of what's happening?
Well, the movie starts off on the wrong foot completely with a scene of Gene, presumably as a teenager, schlepping home a set of drums. And none of that ever happened. I mean, that is absolute mythology. And even if you look at the drum set and realize that it is at its earliest a late 1930s, early 40s Slingerland Radio King set, which didn't exist in 1927, but this is to show Gene's introduction to the instrument, according to the movie. It was not going to be something that he would have had. The set didn't exist in 1927. There were other funny bits about that, not least of which was the fact that Gene's father died when Gene was 7 years old. Also had a German accent. His father was born in Poland.
I've been too easy with my baby son.
I don't think, other than making Gene a blonde in that scene, they couldn't have gotten it more wrong.
At your age, I was already working for 8 years. But I wanted you to be somebody.
But I think I can be somebody as a drummer.
Somebody fine. A priest, maybe.
But I want to be a drummer.
I will say, too, they make Gene very kind of whiny throughout the movie, and a little bit like...
a spoiled star.
Yeah, throughout the whole thing.
Which he was not.
I'm getting a chance to play with a bunch of guys at Austin High. They formed a band, and they play jobs for money, Pop. That's what I'm going to do. Oh, can't you see, Pop? I gotta.
Those are actually World War II era. I think they were Leedy dreadnoughts. I'm not sure of that. Yeah, it's completely out of place. But, put some wood rims on something, stick a bunch of other goofy looking stuff, and all of a sudden you've got a 20 set of drums, by golly.
Well, it's interesting they chose those because those are famous just for being like, they're World War II drums. They're that weird period of like wooden lugs and stuff with the Ludwig Victorious and the Leedy Dreadnought and the Rolling Bomber. It's like, why those?
Well, keep in mind, this is 1959.
Yeah.
And all of the myth and legend and allure about rolling bombers and dreadnoughts, all of that didn't occur until probably the last 10 to 15 years. Before that, the drums, and Joe Meckler will hate me for this, but I've told him to his face. Most of the veterans, because I'm also a World War II historian, I've spoken to quite a few who played drums in the service during World War II. They hated those. They said they were junk. They were terrible. They'd fall apart. They'd fall over. They never held a tuning very well, et cetera, et cetera. But now they have this mystique and aura that surrounds them. And, just like this movie, okay.
Yep.
I guess we learn to love a turkey, even if it's a turkey after a while.
Crazy, man.
Man, and I was worried about who was going to fill in for Davy Tuff when he cuts out for New York.
All right, and then maybe a little explanation for people, because Dave Tuff comes up in this a lot. Maybe explain who Dave Tuff is and why he's important in this film.
Well, Dave Tuff was actually a contemporary of Gene's, but more, he was a Chicago mentor. Gene was a tiny, tiny bit younger than Tuff, but it was Dave Tuff who made the suggestion of where Gene should go to hear real jazz.
Well, there's 1 point for the film for having that correct, for having Dave Tuff involved,
Well, the problem with that is they have Gene subbing for Dave Tuff because he's going to New York, and it never happened that way at all.
Yeah. It was just convenient.
Yeah, right.
A lot of convenient things.
It seemed to be, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we've got some incorrect gear so far, a correct person, but a lot of incorrect things along the way.
Hey, Eddie. Hey, what's that? Oh, they're just testing. See, in case of a raid, the light blinks a warning from the front door. That is, unless you blow out the man's fuse box. If you remember how.
Yeah, pause right there.
Oh, God.
Obviously, that sounded like a hi-hat, and that was a crash.
Because it was, and very incorrect for 1920s. First of all, the equipment was wrong. The scene is wrong in the sense that when Gene was in seminary school, he was actually playing saxophone. Whether he actually came back to Chicago and sat in at some jam session somewhere is anybody's guess. But I seriously doubt he would have done it in those clothes. I seriously doubt he would have been playing on the same drum set that he had in the scene before it, which was also a wrong drum set. In fact, he's playing a ride cymbal that way. Granted, Gene was riding cymbals back when they were still being called top cymbals and playing ride patterns. So Kenny Clark did not invent ride cymbals, but they weren't playing them the way they should in this film.
Yeah, because the timekeeping device would have been like the snare drum at that point. Instead of a steady ride pattern or a hi-hat, a lot can be wrong in a very short clip with this, you know?
Absolutely. What's really nice about it is the job that Gene did and the job, frankly, that Sal Mineo did.
Sal Mineo does a very good job with, I mean, the hair and the playing of like a young Gene Krupa. He does look like it.
Yeah, in the places where he's expected to mimic what Gene's doing from the soundtrack, he also does a pretty good job.
Hey, man, long time.
Hi, Dave. You remember Gene?
Sure, how are you? Nice to know you. Come on.
Dave Tough looking a lot like Shelly Manne.
It's interesting, Shelly Manne is playing another drummer, and it just sort of confuses things a little bit.
I may have read not long ago that there was another occasion where they used Shelly Manne to portray Dave Tough. Who knows why? I mean, he probably was a foot taller than Tough, and, you know, very different people.
How about this?
Oh, what a way to live. I'm gonna have a place just like this. And soon. Way up high.
There goes Red Nichols.
And there goes Dorsey. And here goes Krupa.
With them?
I'm trying to picture Gene grabbing somebody's drumsticks out of their hand and running up to somebody else's drum set.
Careful with those drums, Sonny.
And there's the lady who threw the party, the evil woman.
As a kid, this makes me want to play drums if I was watching this in 1959.
Yeah. But I think you could black out the screen and it would have the same effect. You notice that Gene is playing 2 floor toms there, but that's supposed to be Dave Tough's drum set. Dave Tough often played with no floor toms at all.
You had mentioned, though, that the one main redeeming factor for this is the soundtrack, and it is great. Yeah. I mean, the drumming is
well,
awesome.
The band is great, too. And I guess we can all be thankful that that came as an extra for the film.
Very true. And that's, I mean, there's plenty of movies that aren't that great nowadays that have an awesome soundtrack, and it kind of pulls the movie along. So I think that's pretty common.
Hold it!
This is the big singer blow-up.
Is this what you meant by real jazz backing? Because it sounds more like a razor fight in the dark to me, all that racket. And those drums. I'm sure all that boom-boom would knock the needle to hell and go.
The technicians.
I said I'm sure.
Maybe that's what rehearsals
I know what they're for. I'm not sure that they do.
Sorry, I'll try to hold
Well,
it
you
down.
ought to
It
be.
goes without saying that this never happened also.
We need these pots and pans.
Wow.
After all, I am not a cooch dancer, and we are not doing the zombies mating call, you know, which may come as a big shock to you. Got a better idea. There. Now you can bang your pretty head off, just to show you my heart is in a good place.
Your what?
I guess they had to have a premise for these two to dislike each other and then make up and then become an item. And then, you know, I mean, all of that leading up to some great revelation by Gene that, of course, never happened. Here's a hepcat.
What are we giving away here?
The most. One sip and you're gone from the Vale of Tears.
Reefers?
Reet, the tender weed. Or as the peasants say, tea, and I don't mean oolong.
So that's what they look like, huh?
Don't give me that, Daddy-o. How else would you get that crazy kick on your drums?
Now, see that right there? Right there, that sentence is what eventually dogged him for the rest of his life. Because of
how would you get that crazy whatever on your
attributing drug use to being the only way that Gene could have played the way he played. It nailed him in the frame up of 42, and it kept nailing him after that. And then this movie came out. He was stuck with that for the rest of his life.
Oh, come off it, Jack. You think I need anything like that to get me out there?
Stand up, Dad. They're going over your head.
Now he's shown to be not cool because he said no. See, the part of the other problem is the fact that they really messed with the chronology of Gene's background, where all of a sudden it's late and then it's not. It's, you know, all of a sudden it's early 30s and then it's mid 30s and then it's back to, you know.
Yeah. So they're just picking and choosing interesting parts of things that happen. And
I can envision the outline, the storyboard that somebody created for this film, so that whatever their agenda was, they got those talking points covered one way or another, whether it was true or not. This is the letter from his mother.
She says she can't. She won't. She says she prays for me, and she's happy for me if I enjoy this life. I wanted her to enjoy it. I wanted to see her face get happy for me.
His mother, according to the film, responded negatively to his invitation for her to come to New York. He leaves it on the snare drum and beats the daylights out of it.
Can you hear that, Mama? They're yelling for your boy. Mama, they approve.
You can tell Sal Mineo is a drummer.
Yeah.
Are his cymbals placed somewhat realistically?
Actually, no, not for that period. And they're also all too big. They show him with what looks like a 10-inch splash, 14-inch hi-hats, which he didn't use by that time. No ride cymbals, certainly not tilted like that. And his crash cymbals are both too large.
Because in the 30s, you would have had just smaller cymbals in general.
Right. The biggest cymbal Gene had was his right side crash, and it was probably a 16, and he considered that a big cymbal. Larissa Donnell, where is it?
Wow,
there we go.
There you go. Huh.
You're like Johnny Carson.
What?
Anyhow,
Wow.
yeah, and a few others. A couple of things they flashed up there. One of which was, of course, the mysterious rebirth of Dick Spiderbeck, who died in 1931. And then Gene playing with Mal Hallett's orchestra. That was 1933. So they really are covering a lot of time here.
Yeah, I guess it's just broad strokes of incorrect people
Right.
and dates and times and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You got it.
All right, now we're getting to a very, I guess you could say, funny scene that's not supposed to be funny, but it's a very dramatic scene about Gene's drug use. So let's see.
Who's the girl you were?
Shut up and give me a cigarette.
Wait a minute. This is not a regular cigarette.
Don't diddle it.
Certain circles, having a beautiful woman in a ball gown hand you a joint behind a drum set, that would be okay. And some...
Yeah, that'd pretty much be heavenly, yeah.
Be somebody, Gino. Put your miseries out to pasture and nobody gets you.
He's going into the zone, man. This is the story of Adam and Eve, man. He's gotten the apple now. Oh, he's losing it here.
You hear that, everybody?
He's losing it.
Nobody can see it all!
Okay, here we
Just
go. With a
over
new
the
batch
top.
of wrongness.
All right, so let's now in this scene here, after we just move along from Gene just having an odd breakdown at the end there.
Look at the cymbal on the bass drum. This never happened also. Listen to the hi-hat being played while he's doing that.
I think of what's his last name, Baduk, Ray.
Well, Ray Baduke and Bob Haggard were the ones that did this originally. Why they have him drop the stick there, who knows? Must be those damn drugs.
That was true, though. There would be, his bandstand would have drums on them, and you have some of them, correct?
Yeah, but they were all 7x10 Radio King tom-tom. I own two of them. There were 15 built, and they were, of course, mounted on the other side of the bandstands, up high, so they didn't have to go around the side of the bandstand to play them.
Those almost look like toy drums.
Yeah, they're all toys. I think they had to overdub all the extra tom-toms, though. The sound quality to me is different. And the strange and never happened floor tom on his left side. And the 16-inch floor toms on his right side.
The double floor tom thing, I think of like Buddy Rich and, you know, things like
when they were two 16x16s, that's correct. But Gene did two floor toms before Buddy did.
Sure.
His second one was always a 20-inch floor tom. A great, huge monster that just sounds wonderful.
I'm sure.
I have several of them, and I really love them.
You've mentioned this before, but how was Gene's reaction to this picture? I mean, his name's on it, you know? Did he grow to hate it over time?
What I have heard from what I consider reliable sources, after working on the Benny Goodman story and the Glenn Miller story, Gene wanted one for himself and was willing to sell rights to the film world to get one. Had Gene known it was going to turn out like this, I don't think he ever would have done it. His response, from what I've been told, was, I wish they had stayed a little closer to the facts. That was his reply.
But that's classic, polite, nice Gene.
Right.
Not like
lawsuit, defamation of character.
Yeah. Which movie Gene probably would have done that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I like real Gene better.
Come on, what is this, a threat?
As you said, we are coming up now on the famous drug bust, which we'll watch, and then we'll get your take on what actually happened.
You got to keep in mind, this actually occurred in 1942 in San Francisco. So we've theoretically moved up to 1942.
Yeah.
Just as sort of a marker for where we are.
We'll get it later.
Wow. This your coat?
Yeah, sure. Why? What's going on? Hey, what is this?
An arrest.
Now, look, fellas, if this is your idea of a gang,
These
I'm
two
pretty
envelopes. One of them containing 37 marijuana cigarettes.
37?
Reefers. The other containing 2. One of them half smoked. Found in your coat pocket.
In his coat pocket.
In my pocket? Oh, now I know this is
Your
a gang.
man here was a witness.
He's holding an envelope though with 37 joints in it, and it is pretty thin.
Well, it's, first of all, more than 10 times the number that were actually found. They were not found in Gene's coat. They were found in his dressing gown, back in the dressing room, placed there by John Patekos, who was working with the feds to set Gene up. There were not 2 envelopes. There was only one. And it was put in there by Patekos, who was his replacement valet, because his valet had been drafted and was gone.
So there was 3. There was 3 joints, is the story.
Maybe even 2.5.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
yeah.
One of the reasons that people still get it wrong, Gene was not arrested for possession of marijuana because they could not prove that it was on him, because what they did was set the valet up to go to his room and get the stuff out of the dressing gown, or supposedly get it out of the dressing gown. And they would catch the valet coming out of the room, ask him where he got these, and he would say, Mr. Krupa. Gene could never be charged with possession. He was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, which was also a lie. The guy was not a minor at the time, but he was paid to do this and then paid to disappear when Gene went to jail, which he did. He went to jail for 3 months for something he never did.
Okay, so and of course I believe every word you say, how did that true story come to light?
Mostly from what I remember hearing from people like my father, and then all of it was confirmed and elaborated on in an amazing document by Dennis Brown, which you can get online now. It started to dawn on me about, 30 years ago. The guy who's responsible for this is J. Edgar Hoover, the same guy who was responsible for destroying a lot of people's lives. Him and McCarthy did more to destroy the country than they ever did to help it.
Sure.
So this was J. Edgar Hoover setting his sights on Gene, because Gene was an easy mark. He was an easy target.
The newspaper behind you is at the point that we are talking about here.
Yep. And the funny thing is, I'm so appreciative of Jimmy for sending this stuff. It really looks like a real newspaper.
Yeah.
Except you won't find a date on there anywhere. But yeah, the props department does a beautiful job with these things.
Yeah.
All these fascinating stories. Bomb is also thrown near where Bulgarian king is conferring. You'd think if I read this all the way through, there's probably some very funny secret messages in here. Like, You know,
Absolutely.
bomb is thrown, and Bob in the arts department's a complete jerk.
Yeah, I mean, but people would have probably found something similar would have been in the real newspaper at the time.
Oh,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
I have many JPEGs of newspaper articles about it, yeah.
Yeah. So you heard it here first and last, and you've heard it in other episodes that it was a framing. It was not true. But again, this movie really just blew it out of proportions. And,
right. It just regenerated everything.
Hey, Krupa, got a reefer?
He's going to tell him. Let him have it, Dino.
Hey, jailbird!
Oh, no. Now he's done it. Well, instead of putting sticks on my bass drum like I always did, I'll get up and walk all the way around and pick it up off the floor.
Was he like really hated by the public like that?
Yeah.
Where like people were like
definitely
jailbird
did
and yelling
happen, yeah.
things at him? That
but
was
only
true.
for a
Okay.
short while. The main thing was Benny was smart enough to get, I mean, as far as everyone was concerned, mostly Gene. When Gene came back from San Francisco, as far as he was concerned, his career as a drummer and a band leader was over.
I felt pretty bad. I didn't want to see anybody. I came home here. I built this house in 1940, I think, and this thing happened in 1943. I came back here, and I was going to go into writing music and so forth, maybe teaching, stuff like that. And Benny Goodman called me up one day and said, come on out to the house and we'll play some. So I did, and it felt good, and he talked me into going to the New Yorker hotel with him, and I did. And I saw that people accepted what I had to offer, and in other words, come home, honey, all is forgiven, you know. And I broke down the nightclub scene, but then I was a little bit apprehensive about the theater scene. That's something else. To see people parading up and down. Don't go see this guy. He smoked a stick of tea. So I went into the Paramount Theater with Tommy Dorsey and was received there, too. And formed my band. I stayed with Tommy about 6-7 months, and then formed my own band. Started up again.
Gene was back, thanks to Benny. Tommy just took it the next step, and in the process added some innovation to what Gene did that probably never would have happened otherwise, that being the spotlights that Gene, from that point on until he died, always used.
Yeah, the red ones there's a whole Brooks was on an episode which I've spoken about, and I've actually re-released it, I think, about the Charlie Watts collection that was purchased and all that stuff from Gene, and the red lights are in.
Right, I talk about it in my book
and in your
too.
book, which we have to mention as well. Which what's the official title? I actually have it. I look through it fairly often. I keep it kind of. I actually keep it in my bathroom, which is that should be an honor. But you know what I mean. It's great reading.
I do. It's the title is GK. Tools that built the Gene Krupa legend.
The movie, I think, from what I've gathered from what you're saying as we kind of wrap up here, is that public perception, it's got an Oscar for that actress, and it's like, it seems like it did pretty darn well. That being said, his friends probably hated it. His, the perception amongst the jazzers was probably, this is terrible. This is so wrong.
Well, I'm sure you've learned over the times that we've spent together, my main focus is not just that the facts need to be correct, because if they're not, they have just as much of an influence. And, I could put together a list as long as your arm of people who have been influenced by the wrong thing. So a film like this, as much as people like the art of it, need to know that most of the movie is pure garbage. It's just lies, and not to be believed as anything other than a fantasy film about a young guy playing drums.
Yeah.
Well,
if it was so, and as you said, if it, in other countries it was framed as drum crazy, and if the whole thing was just framed as sort of like the movie Whiplash, like I mentioned, then whatever, it's just an interesting story. But it is a real person's life.
And the fact that Gene had decided to sell the rights to his name, it was just a really unfortunate thing that what they did with it wound up harming him. Wound up harassing him for the rest of his life.
Because the next generation after generation keeps rewatching.
Right. And when they see a movie, when they sit down in a theater in 1959 and watch a movie like this, they're going to walk out of that film thinking, wow, I've just seen all of the information about Gene Krupa's life story. And they didn't. Yeah. What they saw was Hollywood's imagination with Gene's name stuck on it. And to me, that's wrong. I mean, if they wanted to do something like Star Wars, absolutely. It's fantasy, it's myth from beginning to end.
A lot of liberties. That's a good way to sum it up. They took a lot. They took way too many liberties, and it did negatively affect someone's life. And on that note, I mentioned it before, Sal Mineo was murdered on February 12th, 1976. He was stabbed in his chest outside of his home, which I believe people think was basically because like homophobic.
Right. I think it was somebody who just didn't like gay men. You know?
So terrible. He kind of just in this whole thing. You also want to just say that he's a great actor. He did a wonderful job. It's just the whole movie in general didn't portray things great, but good for him. He studied and clearly did a good job. But
yeah, he did. He did a laudable job. All of the actors did well at what they were expected to do. I just wish they'd changed the title permanently.
To Drum Crazy. Yeah. Well, Brooks, again, you have been my guinea pig on this. I think I've learned some things. I've learned a lot of things about what to do in the future, because there's a lot of drum movies out there. Maybe we do some other Gene. Gene's been in movies. Buddy's been in movies. There's been a lot of stuff. So this has been awesome. So, Brooks, where can people find the book? Or is there anything else you want to plug here at the end?
Probably the easiest way is just to contact Rob Cook at Rebeats. There have been 100 final copies printed. And unless I get wealthy between now and then, the book is pretty much dead after that.
Really?
Yeah.
You can still get it. You can get it digitally.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's true. Sure. Through Hudson. Right.
Through Hudson. Yes.
But yeah, Rebeats Publishing. I don't know what the story is, whether they're still selling them on Amazon. I don't think so, but I honestly don't know.
Okay.
So, hopefully I will have some copies here, but I have to be able to pay for those.
It's a great work of art, I will say. Just looking through it of the amount of, I know the amount of effort you put into it. I feel like I've done an interview with you way early in the process when you were releasing. Then we did one about the book, and now we're at the point where you're saying the book is dead.
Right.
So we've covered the full story of the book. But no, you can still get it, and it's a phenomenal... you don't need to be Gene crazy, you know what I mean, to enjoy it. It helps, but you can open a page and go, oh man, I didn't know that. At any point, you can find something out.
Well, I always realized that it was likely to become a textbook more than a good read. So, that's what it is. It's a reference book.
Yes, and we were discussing before, there's some other fellas who are really great Gene experts as well, who I think you guys all join forces and pull information. And,
actually, at times we do, yeah.
Do you want to give those guys a quick shout out?
The main one is my good friend of close to 40 years now, Jerry Brennan in the UK. Jerry has a phenomenal collection of Krupa stuff and has a phenomenal knowledge of primarily personnel, recording dates, places. He's become sort of the king of the alternate take, and has alternate takes that would really raise your eyebrows as far as stuff Gene did that are markedly different from the ones that were commercially released. So yeah, he's sort of become alternate take Jerry.
That's funny.
Plus, he's a great guy, etc.
Sure.
And Paul Testa, of course. No one has amassed the photo collection of Gene that Paul has. And Paul is actually one of the few who spent time with Gene a long time ago. And he has knowledge of things that no one else could know because Paul was there.
Yeah.
But his contributions have been primarily photographic. And then, of course, Sean Martin, who started the first internet Gene Krupa page and still maintains the best Krupa page on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and there are times when we actually, the four of us, collaborate, so to speak, or will confirm something or, or necessarily politely disagree until we get it sorted out.
That's how you get to the truth,
That's pretty rare, though, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. If you guys watching this, I mean, this is obviously a pretty specific thing. This is sort of a test that Brooks has been kind enough to help me out with that I think will be really cool. I say at the time of recording this, we'll see how it turns out. I think it'll be awesome. If you want more of these, comment below. I'm trying to focus more on YouTube. So thanks to everyone for watching. And Brooks, my friend, thank you for taking we've been doing this an hour and 45 minutes now.
It's great.
So thank you for doing this. I
My
appreciate
pleasure,
it.
man. Anytime.